I have three questions for the father and one question for our legal expert. The first question regards the very topical Gödel theorem reference that every formalistic scheme is incomplete, that is unable to answer the questions it broaches, and the chaos, even though it appears to be different. Recently it was proven that it suffers from the same ailments. I'd like the father's opinion in that. The second question, it has to do with something arbitrary that I've done, because I'll be speaking tomorrow. And just because I got a little bit dizzy with the definitions of the nous or the intellect, the mind, I said that the nous is the software running, whatever the software is, in the brain. I'm not concerned with what it is. We don't know for all intents and purposes. However, father, if it is not a software, then we move to the sphere of philosophy and theology. I have nothing to add. If I take it that this is software, then we can talk. We can discuss artificial intelligence. I'd like your comments on the first and the second comment. Let me add here, to save on time, that I stand behind you 100%. Indeed, Father Gregory, the intellect, the logical coherence of a sentence or an action is something that comes from a process of our mind. Inside our brain, for this to happen, the software is tantamount to the secretion of different substances. There are different chemical substances interacting in these concave surfaces. So what happens? Because we need to harmonize all this. This is what I tried to say, in effect, and this is what Saint Gregory Palamas tried to say. What was it that he said? That we had two nous, in fact, what you call the software, but also the nous, the nous, excuse me, that comes from the theological in the image. What Gödel said, that it cannot be self-defined within its own system. So it needs an external system. And Palamas said that this other system, of course, Palamas didn't know about Gödel, but he said anyway that this other system is the nous that God has given man in the image, so as to reach the stage of in the likeness. And the software that you talked about is the endiathetos nous that generates what we do now, what we are saying, our reason, our logic, our language, which can be mimicked rather, or imitated by artificial intelligence. It is that second intellect that can be imitated, but the other nous in the image mentioned by St. Gregory Palamas cannot be imitated. Hence, the distinction. This is a very important position of Orthodox theology. What Gödel said, what you say. Mr. Adoniou is a professor of mine, very important and distinguished, and I always hear his views with interest. And I said beforehand, please don't be overly strict in your judgment of my presentation. It's important to understand that Orthodox theology gives a solution to this problem. Excuse me, Professor. This is what we are saying, Father Gregory. There is a substance secreted, and I'm thinking that 1 + 1 = 2. What happens first? Do I have the volition to command my software to say that 1 and 1 + 1 = 2? What you are talking about is the second mind that Saint Gregory Palamas talked about. A reason, 1 + 1 = 2. The substance secreted is the reason, the mind, but there is another nous that cannot be expressed, as St. Paul said, and our theology says, this is the logos that we cannot express with words. To save on time, Father Christopher And then I have a second question for our lady of law here. I don't want to intervene. Father Gregory talked about mind. Saint Macarius of Egypt said that as the body has many members, so does the soul, and it has great depth. And Saint Nicodemus of Mount Athos said that the intellect is the upper part of the soul. That's why he called it iemonas nous. It is the nous that governs the soul, and then the soul, the body. Because Saint Gregory of Nyssa said, and it's true, the soul is not comprised in the body is comprised in the soul. There's a long discussion, Father Christopher. Let's have an entire conference dedicated to it. Yes. Father Vasilis Kaliakmanis said it in his presentation. There are people that have a nous of Christ but have no cerebral knowledge. And there are other people that cerebrally or brain-wise speaking are very wise, but they have no knowledge at all in the sense of Christ. The other question, you know that the first binding institutional framework for artificial intelligence in the world passed in June 2024. It was passed by the European Union, and it has a binding force. And as you said, the member states ought to define it. What's interesting about this institutional framework is that we have the classification of AI applications vis-a-vis their risk. There is a level which is prohibited altogether, and there is a level which is tolerable or permitted. I think, Chairman, and we should discuss it, I suppose, the Church ought to intervene. The time is ripe for the Church to intervene to see which of the concerns of the members of our Church fall within the different grades of this framework. Now is the right moment. Okay. The organizers are telling me that we need to ask questions alone. In my presentation tomorrow, I have the institutional framework. Okay, this is interesting. We'll listen to your presentation tomorrow with great interest. Let me briefly say that I agree completely. And let me come back to what I said when I started my presentation. We'll be called upon to answer what is religious and what is not. So it's important for the Church to intervene here and say that quite possibly certain things are not religious. A church based on artificial intelligence is not religious, not subject to protection, hence. And something that has nothing to do with artificial intelligence, but with what is religious and what not. The Pastafarians, which is a parody of a religion. There is the court decision of the Supreme Court of the Netherlands. People resorted there because they wouldn't allow a member of them to use a sieve, for example, in the photograph for the driving license, and the court said that you're doing nothing illegal, but you're not a church. You have a right to express yourselves. You can wear sieves on your heads if you want, but not when your picture is taken for a driving license. In the Netherlands, this is a religious community. It is recognized as a church. Scientology, let me add it as an example. Scientology, it may be imitated, and in America we can have a digital church with many, many members, Scientology. Nikos Grigorios said something about the interpreters. It's one thing to talk about news and one thing to talk about the mind. Saint Gregory Palamas talked about news. It has no translation. We use it as news. There's a difference between news and mind. For Mrs. Palioura. Okay. Konstantinos Tsimopoulos, bioethics professor in Boston, Medical School of Harvard, and the School of Theology of the Holy Cross. A very quick question. I tried to find if there is a committee like the Synodal Committee on Bioethics by the Archdiocese, if something similar has happened for artificial intelligence in the Archdiocese of America. Only last week we had the first such committee for artificial intelligence. I was invited to participate, that's why I know it. The first meeting took place on Friday. Is there something like this likely to happen? Will it need to be done because it borders on law? I didn't know what you said about the Archdiocese of America, and thank you very much. I'll look into it. As far as I know, we have nothing of the kind of Greece. I don't know whether it will be established. In my opinion, we should, yes. Well, thank you very much. My name is Kotsiopoulos, professor of sociology or Christianity from Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. I would like to ask a question. In sects and heresies, we see the problem of artificial intelligence deification. In America, in the United States, there is the terrorism. We know Lewandowski and many other theoreticians who talk to us about doing away with the doctrine of Christian resurrection because we'll have the uploading of human conscience and digital holograms or robot copies, etc. So they will exist while we are dead. There is a matter here, a matter of legalization of such opinions. This is point number one. Point number two, worship. Worship is an internal issue of the church. The state will not dictate how church will understand worship or a liturgy, for instance. Even if the state comes and says that it is a human right or an individual right for us to use, to worship digitally, if the church says differently, if it doesn't talk about worship as a digital reality, but as an interpersonal relation and relation with God, the laws of the state cannot intervene in the internal corporis of the church. And in that sense, the self-governability of the church cannot fall under the prism of individual rights. Thank you. I agree. This is it. And this is how we analyze the right to religious autonomy. The European Court of Human Rights have analyzed it as such. Let me dwell on something practical. What happens? Sometimes the state does not understand this. The state does not really know what religious worship is all about. And just because it does not know, that is why religious communities, because ours is a community of religious pluralism. So it has to do with all religious communities, not the church, the Orthodox Church alone. That is why they don't have the reflexes to issue some texts that are valid in the state, because the state or the court cannot understand a canon, for example, and they shouldn't try to understand, because we saw the Council of the State that has distinguished laws. This case law has been changed. A civil court has no such power. In practice and in legislation, we see that the state fails to understand what you said.
2,5 λεπτά. Μπορούμε να έχουμε 1-2 ερωτήσεις.
Yes, we can take another 2 questions. Father Vasilis Kaliakmanis from the Thessaloniki Department of Theology. I just retired on the 31st of August. I would like to say that the presentations were very good. Theologians do not have the experience of practical, let's say, presentations that help us with the solution of legal issues. Now, to Father Theodorus, posthuman, is it probably a saint? Is that that's what you said? But is that an exaggeration? Because there's a difference between what we call a saint and what the posthumanists call a posthuman. So it's difficult, I think, to say, Father Christoforos, that this person is a saint? Well, Father Vasilios, post-human is a way of saying it's beyond the image we have for humans. It's not like a transhuman who is immortal and has parts in the body that are bionic. Yes, but this might cause confusion. That's why I posed the question. I understand your view, your point of view. But on the other hand, we have to communicate with people outside this room. We need to see the terminology. There are people who use post-humanism and post-human as a term. When I say that the real post-human is as the saint, people will look at me and say, what is he talking about? Mr. Kotsiopoulos, one last question. For what Father Vasilios said, I fully agree with his objection. It's a different thing to be a saint and a different thing to be a post-human. The post-human is the hybrid between a man and a machine. A saint is a man, a deified man. Yes, but in my text, the word saint as a post-human is in quotes. So maybe we should be careful, maybe not even in quotes, because you know the word post-human is a change in anthropology. A saint does not change anthropology, it transfigures it in a way, transubstantiates it. I had this question too. So a man who uses an implant to make calculations more quickly or to see in the infrared spectrum, isn't that a post-human? Yes. It's a human, but instead of having the tools on the computer, he has them in the brain. Well, the difference for me, in simple words, is that what you said and what we mean by the word post-human are there because they are useful in a certain way. A saint sees life in a different way. A saint has gone a step further down the road. Thank you very much.